welcome to our tabletop role-playing game freelance mentorship, or the TTRPG freelance mentorship podcast, hosted by Decoratees Radio. I am Crystal Mazur. I am going to be the host for our very first episode in this series called Getting Started in Freelance Writing. A brief overview of our series is that the goal for this is to help people who are interested in freelancing or curious about how freelancing works. Maybe they are fans of some of the writers for some of the RPGs. They follow them on social media and are curious about what it is they do. Or somebody who is in freelancing already and maybe struggling with a certain part of freelancing or wanting to connect with other writers. And we're taking certain chunks of freelancing and breaking them apart and dedicating an entire episode to them. I will also be including show notes so that if you are looking for specific answers to questions, we can definitely, or you will definitely be able to search that out within the show notes. So, I am here with the first guests that I have for this podcast series, which is Carrie Poley and David Whitworth.
Hello.
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 And just for full disclosure, Carrie is my sister-in-law, and David is a part of the Darker Days Radio podcast series. So, onto our news section. So. Some quick news. First off, Gencon is coming up. Hopefully this podcast released before Gencon. That's the goal. Myself and Chig are going to be recording two different panels. First one is horror and gaming, where we are going to have hosts from Chaosium, as well as from Modifius and Renegade Studios. And we are also going to be recording a Darker Days Radio podcast episode, and Chig and I are going to be taking questions, but also going into some other fun stuff on that. I am also hosting or co-hosting a panel on this topic, so the TTRPG freelance mentorship, with Pat Edwards, who is a writer that I worked with on both Sirens as well as the Red Opera. We are going to be co-hosting this panel there live.
I'm guessing there's going to be no coffee in various forms during those.
Not the form that, no, not that specific form. But I've been debating on pixie sticks, just because I want to be Chig's problem.
Pixie sticks. Yeah, make Chig do some work for once.
He's going to listen to this and be like, oh, man. All right, in other gaming news, Trinity Continuum Aether, which is the Victorian steampunk setting for Trinity, is currently on Kickstarter for the next 20-ish days. If you are a fan of Trinity at all, it is a fantastic Kickstarter, fantastic game, beautiful art. Look it up. And then, Dave, did you want to do these other ones?
Yes. So as Gencon is coming up, that means we also have the Ennies on the way. And so we've got the voting going out there. In kind of relation to the Darker Days Radio theme, Cult Divinity Lost is up for a couple of Ennies within that category. So the Labyrinths and Secret Chambers book is up for Best Cartography and Best RPG related book. I know last year the Best Cartography was won by Alien Destroyer of Worlds, and that is a fantastic system.
Yep.
So they're in a good crowd with that one. And also the Beyond Darkness and Madness scenario, I think it's a scenario, is up for Best Writing as well. So Cult is up there with some of the good ones. On a side note, there's also one of my favourite games has gone up for a few of them, which is Thirsty Sword Lesbians is up for a fair few Ennies as well. and we need to.
Yes.
We definitely need to get that game going at some point, don't we, Crystal?
Yes. Yes, we do.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one. I need to be in on that.
Oh, it's
Oh,
fantastic.
it's absolutely beautiful game. It's open world, all about relationships and just having so much fun with it. But that's for another day, and it's not really horror, so we'll kind of skip over that one. But also, Hunter 5th edition is now out in PDF and physical copy. And I know that Chris and possibly Pete will be hopefully doing a review of that soon.
Yeah, we got to give them time to read it.
Yeah. So the PDF has been out for a couple of weeks, and the physical book is now shipping to people. So yeah, the next in the 5th edition World of Darkness books is out and available for people. Go check it out, and we'll have a review for that soon.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so quick time with Gencon for both of your announcements is that I will be at the Ennies cheering on all of my friends who are nominated this year and hopefully toasting to them winning. And then also there is a Hunter 5 launch party hosted by Renegade Studios, which is at the same time as the Ennies, unfortunately. But if you are not going to the Ennies, because it's not really your bag, that is okay. You can totally go to the Hunter 5 launch party and hang out with almost every single writer that is at Gen Con will be there, as well as a lot of the other people who write for Renegade. So if you are fans of anybody that writes for Renegade, you'll probably see them there. All right, we are going to move on to our main topic. All right. So I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves first and kind of get into how you got to this point with your freelancing, how you got into it, what interests you, and either what you think your strengths are or even like your weaknesses in it, stuff like that. I'm going to have Carrie go first and then Dave, and then I'll go and jump in last.
Alrighty. How I got here, I'm not sure, to be completely honest. I started writing just short bits, and people told me I was funny, which I'm not really sure if I agree with them or not. But so I was encouraged to write bits, just, story bits of whatever, flash fiction, whatever. And I ended up here because people are like, these should be published. I'm like, okay, but I don't know how to do that. And they're like, oh, you can do freelance and just, either self-publish a book or whatever, or submit it to a magazine or whatever. And there's no real handbook for doing that. Oh, now you want to be a freelancer, chapter 1. So I have no idea. So I wouldn't say I have a wealth of stories that I'm sitting on, but I have a bunch of stuff that I don't know what to do with. So I don't know how to get from like step 1 to step 3. What happens at step 2? So.
And that's the very legitimate feeling because there are a lot of different avenues into getting into freelancing and getting into publishing. And we're going to kind of talk about those a little bit later. So that is a very legitimate feeling that you're having.
Okay, good. Because then it's like, okay, well, I could do short stories that, because short stories or, flash fiction or whatever seems to be, the freelancing, you're putting it toward a collective communal publication. Or do I need to like sit down and hammer it to something bigger and then just self-publish someplace else? It seems like that's almost like two different arenas, but they kind of have somewhat the same beginning steps.
Yes.
So.
All right. And then Dave.
Yeah. So I kind of fell into freelancing, I suppose, is the best way to do it. Say how I got into it. A couple of years ago, Chris from Darker Days Radio reached out to me because we used to work together many moons ago in Games Workshop Manchester. And he reached out to me to start the Dark Hammer series that we have on Darker Days Radio. And from that, there was a few ideas that Chris had for some scenarios within the Warhammer RPGs. And we co-wrote one of those. I have conveniently forgotten the name of it, despite it probably being the most popular thing that we've written. The Warhammer Fantasy scenario with the Headless Horseman in it. It's been translated into different languages and things. It's quite a popular little scenario, and that was the first thing that I ever did. And I just kind of fell into it because Chris has the experience of having done a lot of community content with the Storytellers Vault and things, and then we wrote this thing together and pitched it to Cubicle 7, who own the Warhammer RPG rights. And they said yes. And so it got published, which I kind of sat there and went, holy fuck. I was never ever expecting this to happen. I was one of those forever GMs who has all the stories that I want to tell. Never even thought about writing them or publishing them because I didn't really know anything about that at the time. Then being brought into Darker Days Radio, getting to do that with Chris. And then from there, I am now published with all 3 of the Warhammer RPG systems, so Fantasy, Soulbound, which is the Age of Sigmar game, and Wrath and Glory, the 40k game. I have scenarios within all 3 of those. I have worked with Crystal through Darker Days Radio and Red Eye Games. Is it Red Eye Games?
Third Eye Games.
Third Eye Games. Yeah, there we go. With the PIP system. And then I've got a few things as well now through community content, some through Darker Days Radio and some through my own kind of volition and the side project that I have going under the Drunken Storyteller. And so that's kind of it. I just fell into it, and from there I went, oh, I've got all these stories and all these ideas, and I can put them down, and there are ways that I can kind of tell the stories without actually having to find a group to tell them with. So I can go down and write all these stories, which is it's been an amazing journey. And from all this over the last couple of years, I've had 2 really good bits of news that I probably can't really actually talk about on this episode.
Don't talk about it just yet. Not yet.
No, not yet. But I've had 2 good bits of news that relate to kind of freelancing. So it's a slow. From my initial burst of writing for Warhammer and Cubicle 7 and things to slowing down and doing community content. So there's this initial burst of amazing stuff, dropping down to community content, and now possibly bigger things. But watch this space on those is all I'll say.
All right. So my story is kind of similar to Dave's, in that I did kind of fall into it. So I'd been doing workshops on using games and comic books in the classroom. I'm an educator by day. And a friend of mine who had been writing in the RPG space for quite some time by that point was like, hey, I want you to write for this. I want you to write reviews, write, interviews and stuff like that. He wanted to get me writing. And I kind of balked at that idea. I'm like, I'm not a writer. I don't do that type of stuff. I haven't been trained in it. I write and run on sentences. Or stream of consciousness. I wrote in that for a while. Let me tell you, that is hard to edit. I stopped doing that. But he finally sat me down and he's like, hey, I need a scenario for this open source game, which was First Fable, and it's going to be a Halloween scenario, and I need you to have it done by, September 25th or something like that. And you have a month. And I was like, what?
No pressure.
no pressure. And he's like, yep, and it's going to be it's going to be published. I have an artist already set up. I also have an editor and a layout person. And yet you're going to have a physical book. And I was like, what? And so, I kind of got shotgunned into freelancing. And now, mind you, I did
Welcome to the world.
right. I do get paid for that still. It is by sales on DriveThruRPG. However, I do donate all of my sales to the Trevor Project because of whom the individual that owns First Fable. There's a controversy around them. And I don't want to take down the scenario because it has brought a bunch of families into role-playing. But I donate my portion to the Trevor Project. So, so it kind of started from there, and then the layout person for the book ended up being Eloy Lasanta, who is the owner of Third Eye Games. And he approached me like a year later, and he was like, hey, I have an opportunity coming up. I remember your writing from the first Fable game, and I really loved it. I think you'll be perfect for this, especially since you are an educator, you work with young kids, and you have that perspective. I want you to work on this project. And it ended up being the PIP system core book. And I ended up writing it, and I wrote quite a significant chunk. I didn't realize how much I'd actually written for it until later when reviews started coming out of it, and they kept bringing up like the portions that I wrote, and I was like, oh, I wrote that. Oh, I wrote that too. Oh, I wrote that too. And so it was really cool to hear. And then it ended up winning an Emmy in 2018, and I was completely shocked because that had been, at that point, that was only my second project. And so
Wow.
for it to win an award as it being my second project was really amazing. And during the Emmys...
Yeah, but it deserves that award. It's an amazing system and an amazing book.
Oh.
I think it needs a bit more recognition to what it actually shows.
Oh, thank you. I'm very proud of it, and Eloy is also very proud of it. The two of us worked together very closely on a lot of stuff for it, and we want to make sure it keeps going. But during the Emmys, Eloy had asked me to go up with him because I had been promoting the book, talking about it, running scenarios with it and stuff like that at conventions. And he was like, you have been working so hard at this book. I want you to go up and speak with me. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And we get up there, and then he starts speaking because he's the owner and he's the person that wrote it. It's his baby. It's his idea. And he looks at me and he goes, and I want to introduce you to the lead developer for the PIP system. And I was like, wait, what? And,
Dun,
so,
dun, dun, dun.
and so he shotgunned me right
Imposter
into
syndrome.
right? Yeah. Not that I wouldn't have said no or anything like that had he asked me beforehand, but it was just really funny because that's kind of the relationship that Eloy and I have, is that we kind of like, oh yeah, let's just do this. And then like we go from there to like amp it up into like 1,000 and go from there. So, but that kind of springboarded me into doing a whole bunch of other projects. And my mentality around it, which is if I have the means, I say yes. And that's kind of how I ended up being published so much. So,
Nice.
so that's how I got into freelancing.
So I just haven't fallen into the
And
right
you
hole
now
yet.
have
Is
an
that what's
impressive-
happening?
So, and David, I do. I did not realize how many names and titles are attached to my name until I searched myself on DriveThru, and I went, oh, there's like 2
you have
pages
an
here.
impressive back catalog in there. There's like, it's not just the number that you've got, it's the size of those projects that you've managed to get yourself attached to. Things like Chicago by Night and stuff like that. It's just...
Oh yeah. It's been an amazing journey, and I am extremely grateful, and I realize the privilege that I have of having a lot of big name stuff attached to my name, which is why I wanted to start this, because stuff happened on a project. I'm not going to talk about it too much into detail on this podcast, but I will be talking about it. I could talk about it in other spaces, and I probably will mention it a couple times. Something happened, and people were questioning what was going on. And so I spent a lot of time kind of bringing people up to speed as to what a freelancer actually does and the way that it goes about. And so that's where I got the idea. I had this idea brewing for quite some time. I'd had a conversation with Charles Urbach, who is an amazing artist. Let me make sure I'm getting his name right. But yeah, it's Charles Urbach. He is an absolutely amazing artist. I had a conversation with him at GameholeCon last year about how we've been running into more and more people who are baby freelancers or freelancers who want to get in, or freelancers who are struggling with certain things and then nobody to talk to them. And reaching out on social media gets them nothing, because it's a lot of times it's a lot of white noise surrounding them that it's so hard to get through. So I wanted to make something where people could go to, look for specific things, and that's what I came up with this. So
I
we're gonna.
I think what you've done with this, and now knowing kind of the future layout of where this is going, obviously through DDR and stuff, this is going to be a great resource for not just the people stepping into freelancing and kind of knowing how to start and things, but for people like me as well, who are a few years in, but kind of then at that point, it's like, how do we push it further? How do we go beyond just this community content stuff, and how do we get these connections that maybe we don't understand how to fully get? And just kind of giving those hints and tricks about the trade. And there's not much out there for those for freelancers. And if you're trying to put your name out there and say, I'm a freelancer, and doing this, and this, and then you kind of see all these other stories that hit the news about certain things, and you're just like, do I want to be involved with that? And it's like, yes, you really do, because you don't want to be involved in that side. You want to be involved in the indie side, where there's so much amazing stuff going out there. And I think this is going to be a really good way for people to learn beyond the D&D, I should say.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the different challenges that each of us, because we are all in different phases of where we are for freelancing, right?
Oh, yes.
So I want to talk about some of the challenges and that you are either in the process of overcoming, or you've faced and overcame, and how you overcame those, and what resources you use specifically, because I think that putting more and more resources out there is going to definitely help others. So I'm I'm going to tier this, because I want Carrie to speak first, because her challenges, I feel, are going to be very different than Dave's challenges and my challenges and stuff like that. So Carrie, why don't you start?
Start. Challenges that I'm facing getting what I have done so far out there, right? First of all, is not knowing where to go. I mean, I've looked at, Storyteller's Vault and whatnot, and some other places for things that aren't game related. And it almost seems like, yeah, come here, and there's like a big sign, but behind the sign there's this featureless wasteland. Like not that there's nothing there, but I can't decipher what I'm seeing. So you're like standing in line, and you've got your manuscript in your hand, and you've got a couple people saying, yeah, I'll take it, but you don't know how to put it into their hands into the appropriate format. You don't have the means necessarily to edit it, to layout, to graphics, to do all that other support system. I guess, I don't know if that's the right term to use, to make it acceptable to the ones who will be in charge of publishing it, because nobody wants a manuscript that has, run-on sentences and terrible spelling, and, you're losing your voice halfway through, shifting perspectives. So it's like, I don't know where to go. The hardest part, I suppose, is actually getting something done. But then, so you get something done, and you're looking at these different avenues of publishing, and it's now again, it's like another step. Who do I talk to, and how do I get the support staff? And there's nobody to reach out to. Both the two of you were talking about how somebody reached out to me and said, I'd like you to work on this, or I want you to work with me on this. Somebody starting out doesn't have that network to call on, me like, hey, can you look at this and make sure I've got my formatting laid out? Can you tweak this on whatever graphic program that you have so I can get a good picture for this? There's if you don't have the network, how do you navigate up into the point of actually putting it into somebody's hands finished, or mostly finished? Because I'm sure that once you give it over to them, they're still going to make some corrections, but I think that's the biggest one I'm looking at right now.
Okay. So a couple of things is that some of those answers are going to be coming later on in the show. I've kind of switched stuff around in the show notes just to give you guys a heads up. But yeah, I do feel like that first off, I will say, like you said that layout is a big thing. If you are submitting stuff, usually layout is not going to be the thing that they're looking at, and that's because they know that writers aren't necessarily layout people, and et cetera. Like I am not a layout person.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier yesterday, weren't we, Crystal? Like layout sucks. Was it yesterday or today? I can't remember.
Well, I suppose it also depends on what you're. I suppose it also depends on what you're submitting. Like I'm sure because submitting, any sort of like short or a game mechanic or whatever is different than like doing a novella or a novel or.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh yeah, very much. If you're looking at kind of self-publication and going through like the community content stuff, layout you have to do yourself. If you've been commissioned by a company, then all you have to do is send them a Word document or a Google Doc thing in the style that they want it, and then they do all that wonderful black magic in the back scenes where they fit pictures and things around stuff.
Yeah, I am very much the meme of the Microsoft Word where you add in a picture and then all of a sudden everything shifts and sirens are going off in the background. That is me for layout. I laid out several. I've laid out several of my community content things, and please don't, like, they are awful. Like, they are laid out so poorly because I am not a layout person, and I understand that is not my strength.
It's not just you though. Word is renowned for this. Being a scientist as well, I use another. We write a lot in something called latex, which is meant to have specific code written into it where you can kind of define where pictures go, and it's meant to be like hard coded into it, and it still doesn't work. He's like, put this picture right here, and you state everything that says it should go right here, and it's like 4 pages later, and you're like, what? So it's across systems.
I will say that one of the biggest things that I do is I'm a very much a visual thing. If I have to write something, I have to visually be able to see it. And I know this drives layout people crazy. I use tables a lot, especially for mechanics, just to even just to like separate out visually stuff, and then I will put it into, because a lot of places will have what's called a style guide. And the style guide is what you need to use to submit your work. A lot of times the style guide will have the different fonts that you need to use, the sizes, the indentation, whether you are using M dashes or regular dashes. Are you using the actual bullet point mechanics, or are you actually physically putting a point there? A lot of places will have all of those specified in there, and you have to use that style guide. And the style guide will kind of give you that layout a lot of times.
I think before we go deep into that, I think we can kind of talk about style guides kind of deeper later in another section.
Yeah, because I've written one for PIP systems.
They're a beast within themselves, style guides.
Oh, yeah. All right, so some of the challenges that I have currently is that I am trying to overcome my own brain, and that is so hard. I especially with like starting with 2020, my brain has just been all over the place, and that I just watched the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, and my brain feels like that sometimes, where I it's hard for me to narrow it down to one specific thing to focus on. And so, like, that's been the challenge that I have right now, because it's challenging to be working on projects and not being able to focus on them. And I know a lot of people do struggle with that. I never had this much of an issue uh, since, except for in the past couple of years. So,
I can fully relate to that. I have so many projects on the go at the moment that I want to work on, but I can't sit down and settle on any of them. Like my brain is like, oh, this will be cool for this one, and then
yep.
half an hour later, like, oh, cool for this one, and then it's like, I think all
Even
this over the
setting up
last
this
2 years,
recording was hard.
yeah. It's like over the last 2 years, we've all had this kind of. We had obviously the world went into a shitstorm with COVID, and people started working from home and getting weirdly having more free time and distractions at home. So brains were allowed to explore a little bit more without the watchful gaze of business over us, I suppose. So
Oh, yeah,
that's why I started so many projects, and I've got like half-finished community content stuff going out there, half-finished pictures that I want to throw at people out there, and it's just like I get an idea, start something, and then get distracted, and it's like, ooh, the new shiny turns up. So
I think we're all
completely
also in like
understand that.
survival mode at a certain level. So like you can't sit on any one thing because you're in survival mode. I think for the last couple of
Yeah.
years, which kind of short circuits the brain. Like you don't want to lose yourself
Very much.
because some sort of animal. Like gotta pay attention. Gotta pay attention.
Yeah, I had a something that was meant to go up on the community content, like Storyteller Vault. I was hoping to have it up like end of 2019. It's still sat there waiting for layout and a final edit now. And I fully blame the last 2 years of the world.
You got this. You got this. I've read through it. You've got this.
Yeah, it's just also knowing what Chronicles of Darkness layout is like, and I'm just like, ugh.
All right. So, David, you want to talk about your note that's in there?
I just put that in there because I just completely remembered it. But it does kind of relate to challenges as well in a way. So I don't know how many people who've listened to Darker Days Radio know this or know much about my history before Darker Days Radio, other than that I worked at Games Workshop. I lived in Japan for 7 years, teaching English because that's what you do when you're out there. But I luckily, weirdly, again, fell into the music industry in Japan through teaching English. And I fell into the visual K kind of music, and actually fell into one of the production companies connected to X Japan, who are effectively Japan's biggest rock group out there. They are, if you know anything about Japanese music, you know X Japan. And I fell into them, and I did some kind of like translation of lyrics and some web-based stuff, web-based English translations of Japanese stuff. And then the company that I was working with wanted to produce a book about Hide, who was their guitarist, who, without going into the history, he passed away with possible suicide, but he's massively famous within Japan, and is a massive musical influence across Japanese rock and heavy metal music. And I was asked to translate some of the book that they were producing and write a full English introduction to this book. And I'm like, I've never done anything like this before. I've never done anything, and I'm suddenly being asked to write what's going to be a very, very well published book. And so that suddenly throws up new challenges. This was a very, very long time ago, before I even was kind of into RPGs. It's when you suddenly get this, I suppose, acceptance or pitch from outside, where someone comes into you and goes, I want you to work on this. And then you're suddenly like, oh shit, really? That you want me to do this thing that is going to be really quite big? And so I know it's another topic that is going to come up later in the series, and it's kind of that imposter syndrome that kicks in. And when you get to a certain point within the freelancing stuff, and you've got enough titles behind you that companies then kind of, either companies or other writers come to you and go, can you write for us? You're like, you have that kind of mental shock that I'm not worthy. How do I then make myself feel worthy? And obviously that is something that we are going to cover in a couple of episodes time on that one, because it also then relates to my science and stuff. But when I got this offer from this music label in Japan, who are a very big label, going, can you write the introduction to this book for us? And I'm like, yes, maybe. Shit.
I can try.
I'll try. And the problem was, and this is another challenge that as a freelancer you'll come across if you are doing especially more of the community content stuff, is editing. I was the only English speaker. And I have dyslexia. And so you're asking me to write an introduction that I have to edit myself for a book, and I can't spell or do grammar? What?
Oh, this is a good leeway into the next section.
Yes, it very much is. And that's kind of why I kind of put that in there. So, because let's say, as a quick thing, let's say dyslexia does not stop you from doing this. I'm a perfect example. I'm published in, actual published within multiple systems. And I have quite strong dyslexia. So
there are
don't worry about it.
Freelance writers that have dyslexia and dyscalculia. There are ways for you to get your brain to work with everything, and there are actually supports that I'm going to talk about that are built into some free programs, because I use these a lot with my students with special education needs and with other sort of reading challenges and stuff like that. So we're going to get into those. So our next segue, yay, thank you, Dave, is
I get things right every now and then.
is what programs or stuff that you need to get started. So first off is that when the gaming industry started, everything was written by hand or typed on a typewriter. And in order to be published, it had to have...
I remember those days.
Oh my gosh.
Dark days. The ancient time.
Yeah, and it's actually one of the reasons why companies like Paizo and WotC are actually in person. Like they are two companies that are not remote. And they started off not remote because shipping manuscripts across the country, trying to keep them from getting leaked, is extremely hard.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
And so they started to, and TSR was one of those two. If you, the newest TSR history book, by the way, is absolutely amazing. It's written by one of my friends, and I'm in the middle of it. Check it out, and you'll see why some game designers are in person. Like they are in groups, or at an actual physical location, because of the shipping costs and trying to edit a manuscript when you're trying to cross state lines with it and stuff like that. is the back and forth it was really, really challenging. And so it started that way. But now that we have things like computers and laptops that are rampant within our society, at least within our country and other more technological countries, we have advantages that
First
others...
world countries.
Yes. I hesitate to use first
put a
world,
blunt
but yes,
note on
yes.
it. Yeah.
But yeah, so the first thing is that there's word processors. And the free one is Google Docs. And that's actually the one that I use the most. And that's because it autosaves for you. I am horrible with saving.
Google Docs is because it autosaves, and it's just so easy to share.
Yep.
So
Yes.
It is super easy to share and collaborate. It apparently is not so fun for layout people with certain programs, and I understand that.
No, it's
but
really not.
You can copy and paste into Word, which is what I do with certain specific companies who request that we use Word. I'll copy and paste it because if you just download it as a Google Doc into a Word, it won't format the right way that you need it to for a lot of those documents. Just copy and paste it, format it into that way, or write it in chunks and copy and paste the small chunks. Whatever you need to do. But Microsoft Word is getting better. I will say it is getting better, especially since they now have that cloud that you can write in.
So like the DocX.
Yeah, it's OneDrive.
World is coming up. Yeah, the OneDrive stuff. But kind of on that same idea, again, we'll kind of come up to this later. You'll find that a lot of companies will throw their style guides at you in Word.
Yep.
Because it allows that layout.
Yep.
And it is
you
so
can
much
actually
easier
just
to do that layout. Yeah.
Yep. You can erase or you can, make a new template based off of it. Yep. And then the other one is Scribus. So Scribus is a program that a lot of people who write for film scripts or comic books will use because it is highly formatted. I do know that I think Magnus Archives uses Scribus too. Rusty Quill. I'm fairly certain they use Scribus too for their podcast episodes for the writing of it. And what it does is it allows for a much easier time to move things around within your document. So like a chunk of writing will actually be its own like post-it note is how I picture it. And you can move that post-it note around a lot easier within that document versus Google Docs or Word. And it allows for easier formatting and stuff like that. It is a paid program. It is, I think, reasonably priced. However, again, I do not work a minimum wage job. So please take that with a grain of salt. Because I do feel like there are other programs that you can save up money for later that are more worth your time than Scribus. But if that is something that helps you or helps your brain, definitely go for it.
I've never heard of Scribus before, so I might check it out because it sounds kind of cool.
It does have like
also,
a free, I think it's like a free week or a free month of use. So you can actually try it out for free for a certain period of time. So yeah.
But yeah, I think I know like one of the free, cheaper or freer programs we're going to talk about in a second that is probably a lot more useful.
Yep.
But Scribus is something I've never heard before. But if there's something out there that, especially if you're doing something like Magnus Archives or you're doing more kind of like the live play, actual play, and you want a script for stuff, it sounds like something that would be quite useful to do if you want to kind of then make that into a narrative and do more with that kind of scenario writing, I suppose.
Yep. And then, okay, so moving on is going to be grammar. So every writer needs an editor. Honest and truly.
Yes.
I need about 7.
And it's not because like I teach kids who struggle with writing, and I always say that even like some of the best writers are actually
Teach
the
me.
worst writers. And I've had students who have come up with better stories than I have ever, and I have ever will be able to dream of. And so it doesn't matter just how skilled you are in writing. If you have a good editor and you have a good editing program, both of those will help support you. There are two that I recommend. The first one is Grammarly. There's the free version. I think this is the one that you were talking about, Dave, right?
Yes, it is.
It has been phenomenal for me. I ended up buying the actual program, and honest and truly, it is worth the money. For me personally,
I am this close to buying the actual, because I now actually have a job and can afford to do things. I am very close to buying it
Yay.
because of aforementioned dyslexia.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that it does check for is whether it's passive voice. Yup.
Yes, I have problems with
What
that.
I will say,
Everybody
with
has
the free
problems with
version of
that.
Grammarly, so what I'll say with the free version of Grammarly is it's a web-based. It's mostly web-based. So if you're working through Google Docs or the web-based Word documents and even emails, it just applies instantly to all of the things that you will write on a browser.
The
But the
paid
free-based
document.
things we are seeing. You go ahead.
Sorry.
Crystal.
The paid version of Grammarly will allow you to open up in an actual program for Word. So
Yeah, so
like
it'll do it
it'll port
offline.
everything to Word. Yep.
What I found is that because Grammarly has now come out and it's free, that you've got this free thing that's out there, I've discovered that Word, the online Word and the online Google Docs have roughly the same checks on them as well. So if you are working with Google Docs, have Grammarly installed, because then they'll both work together and they'll pick more up than just one of them by themselves. But they are relatively similar. What Google Docs and Words don't do is that wonderful passive voice thing that I suck at. So I have Grammarly for that very reason.
The other thing is actually a free website. So if Grammarly is not your thing, you can go to the Hemingway Project. The Hemingway Project will only have a certain number of word count that you can put in there, so you have to copy and paste. But what it does is it checks for passive voice, it checks for clarity, and it checks for grammar and spelling as well.
Huh. Interesting.
So, yeah. It's what I used before I got Grammarly. I used it for several pretty big projects. One of them was over 18,000 words that I wrote, and I went and copied and pasted the entire thing in Hemingway.
Wow.
That was one of the reasons why I went and bought Grammarly.
Dang.
Yep. There are also you can Google, like, if there's something that you're specifically worried about within your thing and you don't want to pay for it, you can Google like passive voice checker, and there'll be little things where you can kind of throw a sentence in and check for passive voice, but it won't do the whole documents like these two will do, like Grammarly, Hemingway, and Google Docs and Words and things. So there are ways around it that take time, but if you're looking at doing this kind of thing as a more long-term useful way, like Grammarly, paying for Grammarly is definitely it's again, like you were saying with Scribus, it's affordable. I feel, for someone who has a full-time job. For someone obviously on minimum wage, it's probably a little bit of an extravagance, but what it works at Grammarly on this base free level, I think it's good enough for what it really does.
Absolutely. And then one of the things that I use when I'm getting a team together for a writing project, and I know, Dave, I've told you this to death, but if you are writing a scenario for a specific program, what you want to do with that is to look at every sentence as if it's a story hook. And that can actually help clear up a lot of the passive voice. So,
Yes.
yes. And so taking a look at it that way, it doesn't work quite so well for fiction. If you're writing any sort of fiction, it doesn't quite work that way because passive voice will end up being in fiction in some aspects and some parts of it. But for scenarios and for writing for world building and stuff like that, thinking about every single sentence as a story hook is going to help kind of get you past that passive voice fairly organically. You may not even have to think too much on it.
Yeah, I that's kind of how because one of the things when I first started within the community content side of things was I was throwing in that passive voice. When you're doing commission work and you're working for companies, quite regularly you don't see those final edits until they come out, and you don't see the changes and things, especially if you're working for big companies where they have a lot of editors and a lot of background stuff that's going on. You give them your scenario, and then suddenly it's published, and you're like, okay, where did that come from?
What are steps 2? Like 2 right in the middle. You got 1 and you got 3. What happens in the middle?
Yeah, I suppose we can talk
That's
about that
further. Yeah.
in probably the next bit or later on about that weirdness that happens when you're working for a company. But I had a train of thought and I've completely lost it now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
oh man.
Oh, I derailed you.
Yeah, so passive voice is what we're talking about. Yeah, so if you're looking at community content and stuff, you don't have someone who is going to check these things for you unless you have a group like I do with Darker Days Radio and Crystal and Chris and Mike and Chig and everyone within there, and my own stuff with the Drunken Storyteller, where I have another group of people who can check things with me and we can bounce things around and understand that kind of stuff. Passive voice is something that I actually kind of want to emphasize this because it is a thing within English. When we speak, we use it quite a lot because it's how we interact. But when you write, it's different. You have to describe things, and you can't use that passive voice in a descriptive,
in an interesting, descriptive way.
Yeah, it's a
clinical.
weird thing. Yeah, you've got to be a little bit more clinical. And so, Crystal, you said something that I've again completely forgotten what you said. But when you said it, it made me think about it as if you're trying to explain something to somebody. So like with me when I'm doing my science and trying to explain the results that I've got, I'm going to be a lot more short and concise with what I'm saying. So if you're world building, be short, concise, explain the world as it is, rather than putting INGs and all sorts of weird stuff like that. Be more concise within that writing. Don't think about how you would talk to someone about it. Think about how it should be written.
And there's also and then there were zombies check. Like if you can add and then there were zombies to the end of a sentence and it makes sense, it's passive voice.
I've never heard that. That's awesome.
You always need zombies.
Oh, really?
No, I've never heard that. And then there were zombies. I gotta write that down. Hang on a minute.
Also, if you can add and then there were zombies on the end of everything, it also makes it a million times cooler, but wrong.
I mean,
Well, it's like everything's better with a flamethrower. That's the idea.
yes. All right. So, and I'm going to have a specific episode dedicated to resumes, CVs, and writing samples and what they are. But I'm going to go over really quick like how to build your resume up, because writing resume is not a traditional resume. And in fact, having it like I only submitted a resume once, And it was because I had only one thing published to my name, and Aloy had asked for one. And so I gave him my resume, tweaked it for writing specifically, and like why I would be a good writer and stuff like that. But since then, I have found that having a list of your published content as well as writing samples go a lot further than having like an actual traditional resume. And again, we're going to go over what those actually are in a different episode. But things to do to kind of build your resume up, I'm going to put self-published on there, but not for the things that Carrie is specifically asking for, because she's asking for larger projects. I am talking about things like Lasers and Feelings, where it is a one-page RPG with all of the rules on that page as well as your character sheet. And you do
I
things.
love this game.
I know, it's great. And so doing things like that, and it's free. The person that created it has it free, and it's an OGL essentially, where you can actually take the basis for Lasers and Feelings and put whatever skin you want over it, as long as it doesn't violate any sort of copyright or trademarks. So
It's
there
basically
is
like community content. There's a
Yep.
it's a Creative Commons license, so you can go off and take the concept and apply it to your own world.
Yep. So you can take things like ideas that you have rolling around in your head, spin it for just a one-page RPG, and put it out there. And you can actually publish that on DriveThru.
What's it called? Laser?
It's called Lasers and Feelings. It's based off of some fairly well-known Star series that I know that, you totally aren't a fan of or anything like that. And then I know that Dave and I touched on community content a little bit. And is there really a demand for it? And I will say it depends. Because yes, there is. I do know people who do community content exclusively for their income. And that is because community content isn't just a one payout thing. Freelancers normally will only get one payout for their word count, and that's it. Or two payouts split up between their word count and stuff like that. But community content is anytime someone purchases a product, you get a percentage of it. That is how Darker Days Radio does it, and we have a decent amount of downloads for our products. And so, was there any specific questions that you had about that, Carrie?
Not specifically. Again, I'm so new. It's like I don't know what I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I guess the idea is that I've gone onto Storyteller's Vault and I know that they've got the Creative Commons and whatnot. But it seems I don't know if that's me or not. It seems like it's hard to search. Like, if you're looking for something, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place, but when I'd go searching for it, I'd find the company publications, not the I don't want to call it the fan stuff, but I suppose maybe that's community, like the non-publisher.
Okay.
So it's like, so to me, when I go in there, it doesn't look like there's a lot, one, or two, that there's a big demand for it, because again, there's not a lot. But maybe I just don't know what I'm searching for, because when I go in there and I look for, character sheets or, source books or fiction, whatever, I seem to be finding only the company. Like I'll find Onyx Path, I'll find White Wolf, I'll find, those, but I don't see Bob. Or like, I don't know what I don't see any like standalone artist who might only have like 2 to their name or anything like that. So
Got it. So I'm going to search real quickly here, because I want to make sure that I'm saying things correctly. However, I do believe when you search for community content, it's going to show up. Yeah, because so here is the trick with that. Okay, community content is always going to show underneath the publisher, and that is because that is who technically owns that setting or that
The IP,
the
yes.
world, the IP.
Yeah.
And you have to
Gotcha.
look. Yep. So you'll have to look at the front. So within Storytellers Vault specifically, or like with DM's Guild, there is a logo that will be on the front cover, and that is required to be on the front cover of all community content. So Pip World has one that has to be on the cover. Storytellers Vault has Storytellers Vault like right on the cover. Because I just looked up the Darker Days Radio products, and all of them are under White Wolf for the publisher, but they all say Storytellers Vault, either the new logo or the old logo when it was published, because there's an older logo, is right on the front cover. So you have to look for that sticker there because of how the licensing agreement works with that for community content. I hope that clears it up.
It does, because
Yeah.
I like they're talking about there's supposed to be all this like community content stuff, and I go in there, I'm like, I don't. Did I miss the file? I don't have the secret password. I need the handshake. But okay, that makes a little bit more sense now that it goes under the IP.
The issue is I find that when I branched, so with Dark Days Radio, we obviously deal with a lot of World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness stuff, so we're instantly in that Storytellers Vault world. I have recently got very, very involved in a lot of the Free League games, and they have their own community content, but it's not well advertised on websites or Drive-Thru RPG. So on Drive-Thru RPG, I've got the page up at the moment. On the left-hand side, you've got a list of like the major community content, so DM's Guild, Storytellers Vault, Wargame Vault, Pathfinder Infinite. But if you're looking for other systems, if you don't know what their community content is, you're not going to find it. So despite the fact that Free League are rapidly becoming a major force in the RPG world, not many people know that there's this Free League workshop out there, which is the Free League community content. So unless you actually know that these things exist, it can be quite hard to find them.
Yep.
Which makes then, though, the community content that is produced very, very focused within a small group of people. So I have a couple of things in the Free League workshop and for the game Versen, but there's a few sales on them, but it's nothing like we get with the Storytellers Vault stuff that we do. Because Storytellers Vault is well known, Dark Days Radio is well known.
Gotcha.
Free League Workshop is not that big, despite the fact that Free League is now huge. So it's kind of knowing that these things are out there and knowing how to find them. So if there's a world or a game that you want to write for, look up the system that you're looking at, and then like say maybe as an example, it's Chronicles of Darkness community content, and it will throw you at the Storytellers Vault. Look for the name of the game that you're looking for with community content, and then it will throw you at if there is a way to publish that way. Not all systems, unfortunately, have community content, unfortunately. So
I'm working on
I know that
there are
others.
other ways around that. So
Right. So then it's just a matter of like, so yeah, okay, I'm looking at the page now. I'm like, oh yeah, there's like this little tiny thing that if I'd clicked on the cover, I would have seen it, but I didn't click on the cover. So, gotcha. Like, oh look, there's all this stuff that I missed.
You have to really, really look.
Right? I'm like, oh.
Yep.
Okay. So it was right there underneath my nose.
So, all right. So a couple other ones would be to. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
No, I just hit mute wrongly.
Oh.
Okay. So a couple other things that you could do would be to write reviews, interviews, or articles for a website. You can even start your own, or you can guest publish. I know that there are websites such as Flames Rising and others that are looking for guest publishers for everything. With your reviews, I will give you a huge, huge tip. And it is that if you do not like a product, that is okay. However, I urge you to stick to the specific things in the game and what you might have liked to see. So always offer an option of what you might have wanted to see instead of that. Avoid
constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism. It could also be considered academic criticism because you have to stick to what is published, not your feelings. And so if you are looking to be published by a company, let's say, and you do not like the latest thing that they are put out, don't write a review saying that you could have done it better. Don't write a review bashing things. Like I mean like going extreme, right? Like it's obviously you are allowed to have your opinion.
I can think of a few names popping up in my head right now, but we'll not get into that.
If you want some ideas on like how not to write reviews, look at some of the things that are considered woke, or you know, in the quote unquote woke, and just look at those reviews. Like if you ever want to be published by that company, don't do that, because we appreciate constructive criticism. We appreciate ideas, and we appreciate seeing things from other perspectives. We do not, like, I don't know anybody that likes to just sit and get railed on. I don't. And so, or do what I do, like, if you don't like something and it is really, really bad, just don't write a review on it. I have done that for...
Just ignore it. If you don't like it, don't interact with it. You can always just say no. Like, if it's not... there was something I can't remember what we were having a conversation in Darker Days Radio, the Discord, a while ago. It's like, not every game is written for every person. So
I think it was about Thirsty Sword Lesbians, actually. I love,
yes, it was. Yeah, it's like we were both, like me and you, Crystal. We were saying this is an amazing game. The way it's written, it's really cool and it's really open and it's really accepting and diverse and things like that. And there were some of the reviews out there were just like, no, we just don't get it. We don't understand it. It's like, not every game is designed to please every person. Even if it's designed for a community that you identify with, it may not be written for you personally. So don't get offended by games that don't fit within your worldview, because they're not written for you.
Yeah,
we see this quite regularly, especially within the World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness games as well. Yep. We'll not get into that, but
all right.
Next topic.
I went down the rabbit hole there. I'm sorry. We'll continue. Let's go into podcasts.
Yes, podcasts. So another thing that you can do is start your own podcast. There is some startup cost to it, like you have to have a mic and stuff like that. But there are ways for you to be able to do low to no cost podcasts out there that you can just sit and talk or interview, or build up an audience that way, start getting into some creepy things. I'm fairly certain this is how like Magnus Archives started, was they just started to put stuff out there and then it turned into a huge thing. I keep using Magnus Archives, but that's because they're going into publishing and stuff like that now too, and I'm a huge fan of theirs. So,
giving them a boost.
Yeah. Collaborations. Doing a collaborative work. So one of the things with community content is that if you go on some of their Discords, because I know that the Drive Through RPG Discord has people looking for community content writers working for what's called commission based. And this is going to come up in my don't work for free thing, because I always say that. But working for commission is huge for community content, and that is specifically because a lot of times it is not done by publishers, it is done by independent people who may or may not have the money to do it.
Right.
And so the specific channel name for the Discord that you can get that information on, because I get pinged all the time, is the drive-through Discord. And I can see about getting a link posted, because I know that the Discord links have an expiration date, but I can see about getting an eternal link for our show notes as well, so that you guys can get in there. But you guys can collaborate and do a percentage of sales for some of those collaborations for community content, and is a great way to get your name out there.
Excellent. So, and going back to the idea that I don't know what I don't know, just the fact that they have a Discord looking for people, those are, I guess, sort of the kind of like the resources that baby freelancers would have no idea to go looking for, because, like, there's no chapter 1, go here. And I understand you can't spoon feed everybody on how to do this, but just knowing where to go to get that edge on.
Yeah.
That's just to get their fingers in the door.
Absolutely. And the other one would be to go to specific publishers' Discords as well. What you can do is reach out there. A lot of times they will post, hey, we are looking for writers, we are looking for submissions. I know that a couple of publishers have already done that in their Discords and various Discords and stuff like that. So if you are interested in any of that, I would specifically go there too. And those are places to... Discord has slowly become more and more of a community building place. And if you are not familiar with Discord, that might be something that I end up putting on a new podcast for this series too, because I do believe that Discord, while it has its issues, it's getting a lot better. And if it is a curated or moderated community, it is a very, very good community to be part of.
Yes.
One thing I will say about Discord is amazing, love it. You can end up being part of millions of Discords and just get lost within them. So Discord is a really, really good way to, if you are looking to kind of meet people within the community and kind of get involved within certain communities. So there's multiple ones out there for OPP, World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, Free League, and all the independent companies have their own Discords and things. So it's a really good way to get involved within the communities and learn what people like. It's just be aware that these are international effectively chat rooms, I suppose, is the best way to kind of, if you don't know what they are, they're chat rooms. If you don't have a lot of free time, you can get very lost very quickly within Discord.
I have learned...
Be afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The mute button.
The mute button and mute notifications. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Ignore. Yeah. Mute everything in Discord. Don't be afraid about that though. Don't be afraid that if there's a really good idea that you've got that you want to kind of go with, and say, for example, for me, what I did with when I discovered that Soulbound, Age of Sigmar, Soulbound was coming out, having already worked with Cubicle 7, I sent them a pitch, and I knew that there was already Discords and things out there, but I'm going to say I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I can't cope with social media and things like that. It's not my forte. So I just reached out beyond that, saying, here's my pitch. Would you be okay in this? So don't worry about the fact that you see these millions of people constantly talking about these games in Discord. Discord is brilliant to promote things and kind of promote yourself if you want to go that route. but it's also not a route that you have to go down. You can still become successful without going down that route. Unfortunately, it is becoming the way that a lot of communities and a lot of companies now reach out to people. So you do need to pay attention to it if you are looking to become a lot more successful and a lot more prolific within a certain group. But if you've got a cool idea, you can skip that and kind of go straight to the company and just reach out and just go for it.
Yeah.
But Discord is brilliant, also a pain in the ass.
All right, and then Creative Commons license. This has been coming up more and more. Specifically, the biggest one that I've seen was with SCP, the SCP Foundation, which is also a really, really awesome community. But if you were interested,
haven't they just like put something out as well recently? Like I'm just seeing
they have
loads
an
of adverts on Facebook.
Yeah, they have an
and
art
stuff
book
about,
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the Creative Commons license, what you want to do is you want to look it up, and it's similar to a open gaming license or OGL. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you read it through all the way to adhere to those licensing rules. Is Morkborg CCL?
I'm not sure what Merkborg
I thought it was
lies.
OGL.
It might be OGL.
Okay.
But it's just what it was one of those things that I remember. A lot of things they state when they get released, like Merkborg and another game that I know is coming out. I'm not going to say that because I'm not sure if they've actually officially stated it. They say that they come out under a Creative Commons license,
and that's different
which
than an
basically
OGL.
means you can, an OGL. So again, like what was the game we were talking about earlier, Lasers and Feelings?
Yep.
That's a quotation mark Creative Commons license. And as you were saying, read it, because there are many different types of Creative Commons licenses.
Yep.
What these are basically is that you can take this idea and self-publish it through things like Kickstarter.
Or
to
some things
create
you
your
can't
own
do through
worlds.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of it's an open license to do things with limitations. So
there's some Creative Commons. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say so depending on the system or the genre or whatever the world, that some would let you publish in Kickstarter. That's so that way you can get it printed hard copy and not just like Creative Commons where you can only publish PDF on Storyteller's Vault. Is that the difference?
Yes. So Storyteller's Vault is not Creative Commons.
Yep. So
there's Creative Commons on
Commons
Storyteller's
allows
Vault.
you to own the rights to it.
Yeah, Creative Commons is something very different in that you can create multiple different types of media. So, for instance, you can create like art books or podcasts or stories or videos, because like SCP has like a video series on YouTube, and they also have like TikToks and stuff like that, and the people that create those own those ideas and those videos and stuff like that through the Creative Commons license. However, Storyteller's Vault is a little bit different because you are publishing. It's more similar to an OGL, like what Fifth Ed has, and so there are a lot more laws that you have to adhere to and things like that. And you can't kickstart stuff for community content. That is not allowed through the community content. It's allowed through OGL. So like you can kickstart something for Dungeons and Dragons. You can kickstart something for SCP, which is a Creative Commons license. But you cannot kickstart something for like Storytellers Vault or DM's Guild. You have to publish through mediums that allow you to do Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding source.
Okay.
So one of the ways that the one that I know about and kind of how, because I've had ideas and I've kind of wanted to go down certain routes with it, is Merkborg, which is a Swedish, it's an OSR, so old school role play, based in like this doom black metal weird ass world, and it's brilliant. And there's been a load of Kickstarters that have come out. So we've got Cyborg, which is taking the Merkborg world and running it through a cyberpunk world. And basically all they've done is taken the rule system from Merkborg and applied it to a futuristic world. So Creative Commons allows you to literally use the same rule system and just change the world. Whereas if you're going into something like Storytellers Vault, Free League, Workshop, DM's Guild, you have to work within very, very specific guidelines. Creative Commons allows you to push those boundaries. So if you have a system that you really, really like, and one world that I know has just come up, and one system that I know has just come up is the system that is used in Numenera that I can't remember the name of. I can't remember what it is.
No.
But it's just come up as a Creative Commons license. So if you like the world of Numenera and you like the system that it works with, you can then create your own worlds and systems from that.
Gotcha.
Cipher system. It's a cipher system.
Cipher system, that's the one, yeah. So there's now a Creative Commons license, or at least it's coming up. I don't know whether it's out or whether it's coming up soon. The Cipher system has a Creative Commons license on it. So if you like that world and that system, you can then build upon that within your own work. The Creative Commons is something that is used quite regularly within science, because it allows us then to kind of say someone's idea is, we've got this, there's this idea that we think is cool, can we build upon that, or can we test other ideas within that? And that's how we know that there's certain levels within it. There's this really cool idea, can we test it in other ways?
Okay, so moving on, I think I'm going to add the different licenses onto a different podcast too, because I feel like we could go deep dive into all of those.
All the different variations thereof.
All the different,
Oh,
yeah.
God, yeah.
And there's a lot.
That's 3 hours of conversation right there.
Oh,
Yup.
my goodness.
All right.
We don't want to bore people straight away in the first episode.
That's episode 5.
So let's say that there is a company that accepts submissions year-round. So I know that Onyx Path does, and they have very specific submission guidelines. And others will put out calls for submissions. Others you have to kind of contact someone first. And others I'm still trying to figure out, WotC, how to submit for working with them. So some of the things that you can expect for submission guidelines. So first off, when you look at a submission that you're looking to submit, check out to see first if they have a style guide. If they have a style guide, you need to apply it to your writing that you are putting in there. And that is because they are looking for people who can follow style guidelines. If they don't have a style guideline, that's fine. What I usually do is I like to try to lay out things as best as I can within Google Doc, so it looks somewhat similar to what the published thing is already. So I will purchase or look up in my archives, because I have a ton of PDFs of different games that I can look at the style and kind of write things out the way that it's kind of stylized, so that I can be clear and concise within what I am doing. If they have a word count, and I know this is something, Carrie, that you were talking about earlier, with word count expectations. So if a company says that you can have, and I'm going to use Onyx Path as an example. Onyx Path does have everything on their website, by the way. You can look it up. Please do so. But they ask you for 500 words of mechanics and 500 words of setting or story. And what they are looking for with that is for you to be very precise with your word count. If you can get to exactly 500 words for each of those, that is a bonus. Do not go over. um, do not go over. And what they are looking for is for you to take the things that they give you and make something that is dynamic. And I'm going to say dynamic because it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. What it does have to show is that you are able to follow directions, that you are willing to challenge yourself, and that you are able to take direction. In other words, if for instance you do happen to get feedback on something and you submit again, take the feedback that they give you, apply it to your writing, and submit from there. Companies are going to have very, very different expectations across the board. One company may want you to do exactly 500 words. One company may want you to do 2,000 words submission. That's a huge submission, by the way. It's a lot to read through. But basically, they're looking for you to looking for you to come up with something brand new or something in a setting. It's vague for a reason. and that is because they don't want someone that cannot be creative with what they are given, in so much as if you ask for a very specific box, okay, for a writer to write in, you are not going to get a lot of differentiation when it comes to ideas within that box.
Right.
And so they are looking for you to be able to take these and condense your ideas down to a very small word count, your mechanics down to a very small word count, because 500 words for mechanics, you go through that real quick, a lot quicker than you realize with fiction.
It doesn't seem like a lot.
It does.
500 words is. I will tell a story once we've gone beyond this about 500 word counts and kind of why guidelines are vague once you've completed. But yeah, 500 words is not much.
Nope. And so what they're looking for you to do is to be very clear and concise with your ideas. Have an idea that is either interesting, new, or challenges expectations. Mechanics should be clear. They don't necessarily have to be perfect, but they definitely should show some sort of cohesive thought behind them, and possibly even giving reasoning. So if you've ever looked at D&D spell mechanics, they are very narrative in their storytelling when it comes to casting that. So if you can tell a story within your mechanics built in, that's all the better.
Gotcha.
It's role-playing. It's all about storytelling. That's what you need, isn't it? That's how I work with it.
And so that's kind of why they're so vague. So, all right, Dave, go ahead.
So, 500 word limits. These are a special beast. So, Age of Sigmar, Soulbound the RPG. If you buy the GM screen, it comes with a booklet of a load of scenarios within it. These are all 500 word scenarios. And what we got was basically me and Chris are both within this. We have both published within this. We are authors of 2 scenarios each within this GM screen scenario thing. What we got told when we did this was 500 word scenarios, and we were given a city, or we were given we were given a city within the setting of Age of Sigmar, and told to write a scenario. Nothing more than that. And if anybody knows anything about Warhammer Age of Sigmar, well, there's a lot of shit happening in that world. And if you just say, here's a city, tell us a story, Well, there's over 50 different factions within the game, like the tabletop miniature games of Age of Sigmar. I'm going to say 50. I may be wrong. It may be less than that, but there's a lot of factions within the game itself. And yes, you may be given Hammerhall, which is like the biggest Stormcast Eternal City and is the most holy city within the realm of humanity and things within the Age of Sigmar. But within there, every other faction is acting within that. So when I looked at this and I got given the city that I was working within, I went, how can I work within that city and tell a story that is different to what everything else that Games Workshop have ever put out about this city? Can I expand upon the lore that they've already created and also create something new? So you need to, one, when you're putting these pictures forward and understanding the guidelines that they're saying, one, you need to know the world that they're working with. If you want to put a pitch forward for a game, you obviously need to know the world that they're working for. But then you also need to know how you can mess with that world within
how far
the
you can push
confines
it.
of that world. How far can you push it? And I pushed it to a point where I didn't think both Soulbound and the Wrath and Glory game that I did, I pushed it to a point where I didn't think they would say yes to certain things. Well, I knew Cubicle 7 would be okay with it, but Games Workshop had to sign off, and I was like, oh, I'm saying things here that they might not like. But it came back, and we'll talk about this later. Most of what I said was okay. But a lot of the wording changed. And I've just added something to the notes later down about expecting things to change. So I've got some really good, I got my ideas out there. They actually happened not in the way that I originally wanted them to, but then you have to have that kind of give and throw. So the guidelines are vague because they want you to build these wonderful, amazing stories, but also for you to understand, for them to know that you understand the world that you're working within. Because if I'm going to go into, let's say, Wrath and Glory, and suddenly like Abaddon suddenly comes out and starts destroying worlds, and that's my scenario for Wrath and Glory. Abaddon comes out and he's like smashing worlds up, and you have to go and kill Abaddon the Destroyer. It's like, well, he's a major character within the world. Why are you destroying that? You have to make understanding the world, I think, is kind of what I'm trying to get at here.
Yep. All right. So does that kind of help, Carrie, with your
A little bit.
questions?
Kind of. I have it, and I have no idea why this eludes me as badly as it does. In regards of like where to go and how to go about it. I had another thought there, and I immediately just lost it. Put a pin in that. We'll come back.
We've got an episode about that in a couple of weeks.
Well, you know where to find me.
Well, if you're looking for where to find submission guidelines, you can always look at company websites. A lot of times companies will also have stuff on DriveThruRPG as far as how to submit stuff. They might have something on there or a document or anything like that. You can reach out to the company. Like, you can, a lot of times they'll have like, hey,
don't
email
be
the
afraid
company.
to ask.
Yep, just
Do
ask.
not ever be afraid to ask. Like, if you know somebody who's also written for them, so if you are looking to write for Chronicles of Darkness or something, you've got email Crystal. Crystal will tell you what to do. She's written for everything. She understands the entirety of the world of RPGs. Email Crystal.
As I said.
Sorry, Crystal.
email
Your email box is now going to be full. I apologize.
Right, I'm going to be spamming her every day. Be like,
She's-
Crystal.
You have
Crystal
my
is
cell
like
phone, so you can just text me.
Overlord.
That's right. I could just text you, but you don't want you don't want to exhaust somebody and then be like to dread like, oh God, she's writing me again. I can't deal with her. Oh God, does she talk about anything else? That's just no.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, Crystal doesn't. No, don't worry about it.
All right, so let's say you've gone through all of this, you've submitted, you've built up a resume or you're writing and stuff like that, and now you have your actual first assignment. So what does that look like? Well, so I'm going to be using some titles here. I'm going to be using developer primarily. Developer could also be considered the project lead or the creative director. So it really depends on the company that you work with and where their background is. So I use developer when I'm talking about like PIP system or anything that I'm working with and anybody that I'm working for. So the developer is the person that oversees the entirety of the project. They are the large view person. They are the one that's managing the project. They are the ones that usually have the outline or wrote the outline and have an idea for what they want to see in that project. And they are usually the one that hires on a writing team. Okay? Once you get with that writing team, sometimes you'll meet, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll meet on a Google Meet or whatever. Sometimes it's just you and the developer. So one of the things that I always say, and I got to get better at doing this, is you can ask once you get past the hiring point, who is going to be working on the project with you. And this is for a safety reason. And I feel like more companies need to be a little bit more transparent with this in ways that they are able to do so. So if there are people that you are uncomfortable working with in the industry or who you may have worked in the past, I mean, even if this isn't your first writing, ask who's going to be on the project, because once you get hired onto that, you still can say, no, I don't feel comfortable with specific people. You can name them if you want. You don't have to. So ask who's on the project. And then the developer, what they do is they give you the portion of what you're going to write. Now, here is the weird thing about this. A lot of times you are going to be asked to write things that are going to be broken up throughout the book. For instance, when I wrote for Chicago by Night, I was told, write the kindred history for Chicago by Night. So I wrote it. And
That's a lot.
Oh, yes, it is.
I can see how that's one section, but also then scattered throughout the entire book. That's a massive ask.
If you look at it, so here's the thing. I'm actually really glad that they did it that way, because I wrote the kindred section and another individual wrote the Chicago mortal section, like the actual history of Chicago. And that helped to give two different perspectives to the events that were going on and what events were important to kindred history and what events were important to mortal history. And
remind me to ask you about Vampire the Requiem and something that I'm doing with that, which kind of relates to this idea that I really need to kind of get on with.
If you look at the final product, both of those histories are masked throughout the book. So I wrote this whole one big document, but in layout, it got broken up. And I'm really glad they did it that way, because if they told me that I was writing a history for this section, a history for this section, I would have been so overwhelmed with information and trying to connect with other writers and trying to figure out what worked best for it. Instead, I just wrote what came naturally to me when it came to sticking out for kindred history and the research that I had done with it. I have read all of the Chicago by Night chronicles, as well as most of the Beckett's Jihad Diary at this point. And if you would have been like, okay, you're going to need to write a history thing for this subplot here, and I'd be like, oh, okay, and then I have to try to deep dive into what would fit best. Instead, I just wrote what came naturally, and it actually ended up working so well within the whole context of the book.
It's kind of cool.
So, yeah, it
I
was a
think
real.
that's
Go ahead.
that's a really nice way that the company approached you to do the work, where they gave you that kind of free reign to do these things. I wish I'd at some point had that experience with some other things, and had a little bit more guidance. So it's occasionally nice to have that wonderful the developer go, here, do this thing. Here's your remit, develop everything, and then we'll
Yep.
work with it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that, and there are certain
Yeah.
companies out there who will just go, no, we want you to do it this way, this way, this way, this way, and give you, and basically write it before you've even written it for you.
Yeah,
I've
they
luckily
just want
not
you to fill in the
experienced-
blanks.
I've not experienced that, but just be aware that I think me and Crystal, we've been very lucky in the way that we've
absolutely.
kind of come across it. But then there are certain companies and certain things that have come to light recently where maybe they'll ask you to do something and then just ignore everything that you do and do it do what promotes them over
Yup.
what promotes you.
Yeah.
But that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, that is another conversation. So yeah, so a lot of times you won't actually have like a whole chunk or chapter. Sometimes you will. It all depends on the project and how they're going to be, what's the vision for that project, because Matthew Dawkins had a vision for Chicago by Night already, and he was able to map out how he wanted the writers to approach everything, and he did it in such a systematic way that, you know, to be honest, if you would have asked me at the beginning, and I would have been able to, not under NDA, tell you, you know, hey, I'm writing the Chicago history chapter, and I would have thought that I was doing the entire chapter, and it was actually broken up. I prefer it the way that it is published, because it is gorgeous and it flows so well, that it's not dry like other history chapters are.
NDAs are beautiful.
Yeah, they
because
are.
they allow you to do what you want to do and then not talk about it, because then you don't know what the final product is going to be. It's like, I'm really excited about what I'm doing, and then when it comes out, it's like, actually that's better than what I was doing, because the people who are producing it know what the fuck they're doing.
Yep.
And especially like if you're working with someone like Matthew Dawkins, obviously, well, look at his history. He is well, yeah. If he asks you to do something, you know he's got a plan to make it cool. So just sometimes you have to just go with the flow.
Absolutely. So another thing with this is that word count. And I want to stress this a lot, because a lot of people don't realize exactly what word count is. Word count is exactly how many words you have to type on a subject. And you are given a specific word count. Some companies are a little more lenient than others. I've had it where that there's a very strict word count, because they know exactly how many words are on a page, and they have planned out pages specifically for layout with specific art that they have, that you have to meet those word counts, or it's the layout's not going to work. And so you have to be very, very careful with that stuff. And if you are going over word count, or you are significantly under word count, you need to reach out to your developer and have that conversation of, hey, where can I fill this in? Or, hey, I am over and I know I'm over. Can you help me either pare this down, or can you go through in development and tell me what's going on? You know? So those are conversations that you definitely have to have.
I would stress to a lot of the new people who suddenly get given, not obviously with the community content, because word count within community content is a amorphous thing. But if you are suddenly hired by a developer and to write these things, and they give you a word count, really have that conversation with the person who is hiring you and talking to you about what that word count means.
Yep.
And about how they want you to approach that word count. I have been on projects where I have been massively under those counts, and they've said, yeah, if you just expand these points and go through these points, and you can expand it.
Yep.
And those have been brilliant things. And then I've been in projects where I've hit the word count, and they're like, yeah, this is cool, no worries about it. We can fit around this thing, and they're really happy with it. The big problems that I've always had is when I've hit the word count and they've gone, can you restructure the story that you've written and do it this way within this specific structure because we've changed our structure? And you do that, and then it adds in an extra couple of thousand words. And you're like, okay, cool, right. I can do this, but I know it's going to add in words. So where do you want me to cut this stuff? And through personal experience, I've gone through this and I've asked, where do you want me to cut this stuff? And I've had no response from it. Always fight back. Always get that feedback. Always try and fight for that feedback, because if you don't get that feedback, you're never going to get better as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And within anything that you do, if no one's going to give you feedback as to why you're not doing what you're meant to be doing, then you're never going to get better. So if someone says, well, we're not going to hire you because the last project you did was 6,000 words over limit, it's like, well, I've got emails to tell you that I asked you, how can I fix this? And you didn't respond, then make sure you have a good communication. So word count is not just you knowing that there's a word limit, it's you knowing from the company what they mean by that limit and how to kind of react to that limit.
Yeah, and again, making sure that you talk with your developer about all of this stuff. If something is not clicking with you or not making sense, definitely reach out, because they'll be able to help you. They may be able to help you come up with a tighter outline for your section that's going to help kind of guide you as far as what you need to do.
100%.
Yeah.
Make sure there is communication. Always, communication is key.
A couple of other things. I know, Carrie, you had talked about things like characters and plots and in the story. Can you go through your question for that?
I'm trying to remember what it was that I had in my mind when I did it. So when you're writing for a game system or whatever, how tight do you have to canon, I think is what I'm thinking of. They have these established, the words. Yeah, established characters, whatever. Yeah, you can't go in and kill the Emperor Undying, because that's integral to the world, right? So, I mean, when you've got this great idea,
do it.
Right. Right. When you got this great idea and you've found, you've consumed every bit of media that they have on this world, and you have found the perfect plot loophole to kill the Emperor Undying, and you go and do that, but it just kind of undermines everything that the universe is all about. Are they going to let you get away with that? I mean, can you do it? I suppose maybe they will let you get away with it because somebody's going to buy it and read it and be like, this is awesome. But can you invalidate a world because you got this great idea?
Okay. So I love this question because everybody wants to do it, right? Everybody wants to try and take down the Emperor Undying because fuck that guy.
Right?
Everybody wants to screw around with Menelaus because fuck that guy. And so here's the thing that I have with that, and some of the suggestions that I have is that, first of all, My experience with that was terrifying, but that's because I loved all the characters, the NPCs that I was writing for. It was Chicago by Night. Because I had interacted with them as a character when I was LARPing and tabletop role playing. I've interacted with all those characters, so I love those characters. And so fucking around with those characters was kind of like, you know,
It was personal.
Yeah, it was personal for some of them. And so the way that I see it is that it's, and the way that I got around that mentality is that it's not just me. It is us. And if I do something that breaks the world, it better be for a reason. And if that reason is not in your book, or is not the point of your book, that's probably not the time to do it.
Right.
Yes, you can totally try to figure out a loophole to kill the Emperor Undying. But what I would suggest doing is then pitching something, and we're going to get into that in another thing too, but pitching an idea on how to kill the Emperor Undying. And do they really want to head that way? And I can tell you the answer is no, but...
Right. I mean, because they have this tires thing, and if you just take out like the central key element to it, maybe it'd be a fun side plot for everybody, but like the company at large is going to be like, that's cute. Don't.
And I think that's where fan fiction comes in, right? Like
I would think so. I
love fan fiction. That's kind of why I like community content.
I was going to say this is very much the difference between community content and pitching an idea to a company who actually runs the fucking world.
Yeah.
So like,
yep.
You talk about the Emperor Undying as like, my instinct was like, can we fuck with the meta of Warhammer 40k and actually kill the God Emperor of mankind? It's like, no, Games Workshop are never going to fucking allow you to kill the God Emperor of mankind. But in your own universe, if you're doing community content, which Games Workshop don't allow you to do, unfortunately, yes, you can fucking kill the God Emperor of mankind and let chaos reign throughout the universe. Fucking go for it. Fuck with the meta. I'm all about fucking with the meta. However, if you're publishing shit, don't fuck with the meta.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, I assume that like if you were writing a story about killing the God Emperor, that you would definitely be doing that like community content and not pitching it to the boss and being like, oh, you wanted me to write 500 words. Here's 500 words of where I killed the Emperor Undying. There you go.
Yeah. So I think the key here is understanding that level of how you can fuck with the meta. So a lot of the worlds that people work with, so World of Darkness, Warhammer, and I want to say D&D. D&D is technically world free, but there is now a world within that. Can you really fuck with that meta? With the pictures? Will they accept you saying
that's
God
probably a
killing
situational awareness thing. Like you got to
so
go in it realizing,
So
you
so
need
yeah,
to know
we
the
were
world to know what you can do with it.
We were told that for Chicago by Night, we were told here is a list of the NPCs that we are going to be using. Here are a list of and anyone not on this list, if you want to use them, you have to ask. And then we made a list of who's all died and not coming back, and who's died and maybe they haven't died. And
nobody dies in Chicago.
No,
sorry.
Can we do that with London again, please?
Nobody stays dead.
And so they what
it's
they
vampire.
did was
No one's technically dead.
Yeah, right. But what they did was they said you have free reign to kind of screw around with these characters, and if something goes off the rails with your writing, i.e., you kill Loden again, or something like that.
Again.
Just reach out to us and have us look it over first. Chances are you're fine. Like, because World of Darkness is screwed up, and the whole point of like Beckett's Jihad Diary is to mess with that whole perception of there's a linear timeline and everything is the same. No, it's not. So it really depends on the company and how tightly their IEP is controlled and how
Yep.
much of a reign or how comfortable people are within writing within that system.
Gotcha.
It's all
It's
dependent. Yep.
it's depending on how much you know about that world that you're trying to write about, and how much
Yep.
the company is willing to let you have fun with it.
And
There's
yeah,
a wonderful
like
thing that is written within, I because this is the world that I know, and I know how to kind of work within it. Within the Warhammer worlds, we have this idea of everything is canon, but not everything is true.
yep.
And understanding how to relate those two ideas together. And you can see the same thing within that World of Darkness idea, is like everything is
yeah.
canon, but not everything is actually historically true. So Beckett obviously has his own stories, but every different faction has their own way of telling that story.
Yep.
And that's kind of the idea that you have to then apply to things like what faction are you looking at? Are you looking at the Anarchs, the Sabbat? Are you looking at the White Tower and Camarilla and how they're applying their ways to it, the Giovanni and stuff like that? How do they view this story that is going on? And what story do you want to tell from that point of view? And then is that canon, or is it just their way of viewing things?
Is it their personal
And as
bias?
long as you can get and as long as you can kind of get away with the idea of this is just their view, it's not what actually happened, but this is their view of what happened, and it
Yep.
fits within the story, then that's a way to kind of throw those really fucking weird story hooks into there. But it's just kind of, you have to know, unfortunately, and it's not something we've really talked about, and I've only through this entire conversation that we have, to kind of get beyond just that community thing, is showing a knowledge of that world and knowing how to kind of work within that world successfully is a good thing. So, but yeah, can we fuck with a meta? Yes.
Excellent.
Can you fuck with a meta and get it published when you're killing the God Emperor? Maybe not.
Unless they really like it's really
knowing
amazing.
Those,
maybe
it's knowing
then.
those lines.
Right.
Please
All
kill the
right.
God Emperor of mankind.
I'll work on it. I'll see what I can do.
Okay, so quick overview of most of the processes of how things work, and some of these are going to be different for different companies. I've had a different mix of the different steps within the way out there. First of all, outlines. You're going to get an outline. Every writing assignment should have some sort of an outline that you can follow. Make sure that if you have any questions at that point, you clarify. If it is your first time writing, make sure that you talk to your developer and let them know, hey, I'm going to have a lot of questions. Please make sure you're ready for that. I always did that. I still do that with new projects and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to have a lot of questions. They're going to come up as I'm writing, just to let you know. First drafts. First drafts are usually really, really ugly. They are never as good as you want them to be, and they always tend to leave things out by accident. And that is because you're trying to get through things and work your way through everything. And there's a whole lot of stuff coming at you with the project. Once you hand your first draft in, it's going to take a little bit, but the developer will go through and do what's called red lines. And that's specifically the term that I use. Some of them use developer notes. Some of them use other types of terms. But basically what it is that it's feedback. And this could be really, really hard to take. Even for me, it's still really hard to do red lines. And I give them to people. So I always give myself a day to, I look through the red lines. I give myself a day to kind of process and internalize everything and kind of feel like, okay, I am one of however many voices are on this project, and the red lines help me stay within the goal. So I need to look at it that way. And then that usually helps me to kind of focus up and to take care of whatever notes that I have, and address anything that the developer has. Everyone has their own process for going through red lines. I go through grammar first, and then I go through all of the other stuff later. And that's just how I do it.
Red lines.
And then, yeah, red lines.
Red lines are one of those things that if you've done like community content stuff, you've never experienced them before.
Yeah.
And when you suddenly get this, and it's not something that I've had much experience with before. I've worked with you, Crystal, with the pip system a few times, and I've done the Warhammer stuff, and I've never really had any really big red lines thrown at me. And so I'm very... It's going back to that very beginning where we had that challenges question.
Yep.
I am very worried that when or if I end up in a position where I have all these massive red lines, and knowing my own personal things that will come up in a future episode that you're planning,
yeah,
that red lines will be a thing.
Yep.
But it's understanding, and it's again something that I think is I've stated in something slightly later, is understanding that what you've written is probably you've tried to fit it close to what the company want, but is not what the company want. If it's a pitch or something. So I think I'll talk about that slightly more in that final section. But yeah, so red lines are they're brutal sometimes, I think.
They are.
From my science perspective, we don't call them red lines. It's like edits and referees and stuff. And when the referees come back, referees can go do one a lot of the time because they're not. They can be particularly unpleasant at times, and it's not a comment about you. One of the things I think about red lines is it's not a comment about you. It's a comment about how it fits within the world that they're trying to create. And as long as you can separate those ideas, I think red lines you can kind of get around.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, I've gotten feedback from red lines everywhere from this is about as perfect of a first draft as you can get to, oh my God, what the fuck happened? And everything in between. So, you really
paper
have
nightmares right there.
So you really have to look at red lines as the developer is trying to get everybody on the same page now that everyone has their ideas out. The biggest hurdle is that first draft, honestly, because once it goes into red lines, it's in the developer's hands, and then once you get it back, it technically moves into second drafts. Second drafts are usually where you just go through and you tweak stuff or rewrite sections to fit the voice of what the developer is looking for. And that is okay. That is totally fine. You can't, not everybody can be perfect exactly the way that the developer wants every single time when you have 15 other voices on that project. It's just not possible. I don't know any...
what you've worked on, like Chicago by Night. How many writers were on Chicago by Night?
There are lots.
Getting each of those to have a similar style of writing, a similar voice, a similar way of portraying the world, that's really fucking hard to do.
Yep.
Everyone has their own writing style. Everyone has their own way of wanting to portray a world. And then you've suddenly got 15, 20 people all working on a single project with their own individual ideas.
Yeah.
That's when you get these red lines like, yeah, it's a really cool idea, but can you write it like this? because
Yep.
everybody needs to, as you say, multiple voices are cohesive in the notes, so everyone needs to be part of that project and showing a cohesive storyline and cohesive world and things. So cohesiveness, I think, is the key to red lines.
So once second drafts are done, usually that's when a writer is paid. And we're going to go into pay and everything like that. But I will say, even if you are new,
Don't tell me that.
even if you are new, do not accept anything less than 4 cents a word if you're getting paid per word. And then if you are getting paid per chunk,
for those of you in the UK, that's about 3 pence a word.
Yeah, sorry about that. I forget that there are other countries
This is
too. Thank you,
international.
Dave.
No worries. Yeah, do not accept less than 0.3 or 4 pence, cents, or whatever it is in the currency that you earn in.
Yeah. And I'm talking like that's minimum.
More. Always aim for more.
Yep, that's minimum, and that's for like companies or projects that you really, really want to be on, and you are okay with that. Do not work for free, and I'll get into that later. And then deadlines. So deadlines are really, really important and a huge stressor for me particularly. I am one of those people that I work up until the deadline usually because that's just how my brain is, and it's a jerk sometimes. But I'm trying to get better at it. But if you are going to be over or you are going to be late with your deadline, reach out to your developer. A lot of times there is some wiggle room because they are working with other writers, and so they have some time to give you. But you have to have that communication. If you break down communication and you stop talking or you just go drop off the planet, a lot of times a developer is just going to take that as you're just dropping off the project. So that can be very hard for people, especially if you have anxiety or any sort of social anxiety or anything like that. That can be a very, very hard thing to do. So try to find supports or ways for you to communicate with your developer so that they understand that you're not dropping off the project, you're just kind of falling a little behind or whatever the case may be.
Gotcha.
100% support that.
Yep.
Always have an open line of communication. And if the communication is only going one way, question why, question the company.
Yep.
Actually,
yeah, there are usually
cut that bit out. Cut that bit out. My brain was going places, and I failed.
I can do that. I could totally do that.
Yeah. I had thoughts, and my brain couldn't communicate them.
Glitch.
We'll move on to pen names.
Glitch in the Matrix.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to pen names. So in this day and age, a lot of people are writing with pen names, and that is because of safety with their jobs. I am very open with my district that I write games, and I write games that are not friendly for kids. I write games that are friendly for kids, and that I've never had an issue with. However, I do not work in...
Vampires not friendly for kids?
Not the stuff that I wrote.
It's all cuddly and fun. Don't worry about it. Kids can love it.
So pen names are a legitimate thing. If you are worried about publishing under your name, you can use a pen name. And I will say this as I am a very much a supporter of the LGBTQ community. Dead names and stuff like that, please do not feel like you have to dead name yourself in order to publish. Or if you have changed your name in the currently and you have published under a dead name in the past, reach out to that company and see if they can change that for you. Obviously, there are going to be published books that can't be changed on. However, in future materials and publications, that is a thing that they can change. In drive-through, it's pretty quick. PDFs may take a little bit longer because those are an editing thing. They have to pull the PDF, edit through the PDF, and everything like that. But please,
But what
please,
drive-through can do is when you go through drive-through and you have a list of authors, is that link to the author's names? They can change
Yep.
that very, very
Yes, they
easily,
can.
very, very quickly. If you
Yep,
need to
reach
change
out
the
to
name,
their customer service.
reach out to them. They are fantastic. They are one of the nicest customer services groups out there, and very, very accepting, and will just do it for you. Love them.
Yes.
So much support for that.
So please do not feel like you have to dead name yourself in order to be published. Please do not feel like you have to publish under your name and put yourself out there when all you want to do is just write and have fun. That's totally fine. That is a personal choice. And please know that I'm going to say this as like the RPG big sister. If anyone comes at you for dead naming or for with you at with your dead name and that they're using your dead name, come talk to me. I will have words with them. Because
I will go. I will put myself out there now. It's like I've not done this, and I've put it out there, but I don't think I've openly put it out there. It's like I'm non-binary. I sound very male and present very male, but I'm non-binary. If anyone comes after you, I will fight them. I will literally go up and fight them for you, because I present as a very, very large, strong male, but I ain't. But I also am. So if
Yes.
someone has an issue with you, I'm in your corner. If people don't like the fact that you use he, they, she, they, and have different pronouns, fuck them. It's your life. Don't. That's a different thing. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, me and Krista, we got your back. We got your back. And there is loads of
They're
other
fearsome.
people out there who have got your back as well. And there's some amazing people in the community who will always have your back. Do not, if a company does not have your back, they're not a company worth your time.
And honestly, I don't know any company that wouldn't have your back on that, to be totally honest. If there is, I haven't heard of them yet. But yeah, like every single company that I have worked with or have had contact with or have friends in, they have been super supportive over changing names, over making sure to use right pronouns and everything like that. Games are starting to use pronouns with their characters and everything. It is normal and it is fine. And if you do not agree with that or support that, this is not a podcast for you. Sorry.
Yeah, you've clearly not been listening to Darker Days Radio for the last couple of years at all, right?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so before we start to end this, I have a little like advice thing, but I want to ask Carrie and Dave, is there any other questions that you guys have that you came up with throughout this podcast that you want answered?
I cannot think of anything, quite honestly. I think you covered like all the high points. I'm sure that I'll remember something like tomorrow and be like, oh, I should have asked that. But as of right now,
I'll get to
no.
that at the end.
Okay.
So,
I think
and Dave,
on that point, I was going to say, it's like I've not really got anything, and I know kind of the plan for the future of this podcast, so I know a lot of the questions that I might have are going to be answered. But also, it's like if you do come up with questions that you want answering, do get in contact with us. You'll have at the end of this and within the show notes, you'll have ways of contacting all three of us and Darker Days Radio and other people within the community. If you have questions, I think one of the biggest things that we can always state is never be afraid to ask. We've stated it multiple times throughout this episode. Even whether it's just fellow writers, whether it's somebody who is further along in their career as a freelancer, whether you're talking to your lead developer, your lead writer or something, never be afraid to ask. And if they're not answering, keep asking.
Yep.
And keep going through there. And if they don't answer, then go to somebody else that you know. And never be afraid to reach out to somebody. I think one of the biggest things that I learned I've learned over the last 5 years of me doing this is generally most people are actually okay. If you ask them to do something, most people are like, yeah, no, I'll do that for you. So if there's somebody out there that you have a connection with, that you respect, and you want them to maybe do the editing on something for, ask them.
Yep.
There's no harm in asking. And if they say no, then, well, that was 5 minutes of your life writing an email. What's the problem? Never be offended. Always be open to asking and open. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, we're going to close this off with some advice, and I have some stuff written, and I'm sure Dave has some stuff, and Carrie might have some things too that, as a newcomer, you're kind of taking into your process and everything like that. So, and that's one of the first things is to hype each other up. Support other creators, share their projects when you can. Back at PDF levels, do the PDF level, not the physical book, unless, like, I get physical books for stuff that I write on, but your shelves will get so full so quickly otherwise. Like, seriously, you can still back a PDF or back a Kickstarter at the PDF level for most projects.
Back at PDF because books are heavy and expensive.
Yes.
Especially when you're moving country. As someone who's just moved country,
yeah.
PDFs are a fucking lifesaver.
Yup. And like, there is always going to be jealousy, but you have to learn to sit with that for a little bit and process that, and then move forward, because there are going to be people who get to do cool stuff, such as, write on Avatar. But that is not my place. That was not like, I understand I was not the writer for that group, stuff like that. It's okay to be jealous. It's not okay to let it affect yourself and others in a negative way for a long period of time. Support other creators, back at PDF levels, talk about things. Once you start getting into writing, be very careful about reviews. And this is because if you're reviewing products for a company you've written for, or a product line that you've written for, you do have to be forthcoming on that. And do not review the stuff that you've written for. So, like, you will never see a Chicago by Night review from me. You might see me talk about Chicago by Night or anything like that, but I will never do a review on the book. So make sure you're very careful about that. This is a very small industry. I don't think people realize just how small this is. And people talk. If you have been following anything in the beginning of June, you will understand where this is coming from. Because
everybody knows everybody.
Yep, everybody knows everybody, and everybody talks. So be careful about how you are saying things, and be conscious about that. Never, ever work for free. Working for exchange of services is different. I feel like Darker Days Radio, we have writers, developers, layout people, editors, and we all kind of work for, like, sales commissions for community content stuff. And so we have an agreement with all of that. Never work for free, but trading skills is, in my opinion, and some other people's opinions, not okay, but in my opinion, it's totally fine. And working for commission is fine, as long as your commission is like a decent amount, not like 0.5% or something like that.
I think on that is understanding those levels. It's like we said earlier, it's like accepting that 3 pence, 4 cents kind of per
That seems like
word
an
thing. It's
an
an
entire
entire beast,
episode.
and
It is. It's going to be a
don't.
future episode.
Okay, yeah, I
Yeah,
was like, that
so
seems like a
yeah,
whole lot of stuff to talk about.
there's a lot to talk about how you get paid and what is okay for being paid, whether it's a community content or whether you're being part of a larger commission for something like Chicago by Night or some other big projects out there. It's a minefield, to say the least. But yeah, the big
Yep.
key is never work for free. And I'm gonna take the opposite stand there from Crystal. Trading skills. To me that's a minefield, because you can end up with certain things that have happened, especially over the last couple of months, that we've seen where people might abuse that trade of skills.
And that's legitimate. That's an absolutely
Yeah.
legitimate view.
But yeah, I think never
yeah, go
work
ahead.
for free. Always make sure that you're getting something from the work that you're putting. Like, you wouldn't go to your day job, your 9 to 5 job, whatever it is, whether it's teaching or fucking science or working in an industry somewhere. You wouldn't go to that job because that person is going to say, "Oh yeah, no worries, we'll give you a bike at the end of the week because of the amount of work you've done." Like, it's understanding that fair trade. If you're working for a trade of something, make sure that the trade that you're working for is actually paying off. It's like, no, I'll build
That's
this
fair.
building for you, and oh yeah, cool, I got a car out of it. But how am I going to feed my family? Understand what we mean by working for free, I think, is there.
Yeah. So, and then Dave, you wrote this last one, right?
Yes, I did, and this is something that I came up across when I first started doing publishing by myself, working for companies by myself, so not collaborating with other writers and things, and like doing my solo pitches and things. The work that you write, and the scenario that you pitch something to a company and go, yeah, and they're like, yes, cool, right, that's brilliant, write that for me, here's your guidelines, here's your word limit, here's the style guide, fit it within all this. And you do that, and you write 10,000 words or 15,000 words or whatever it is within what they do, and then you don't hear from them for 8 months, and then the thing gets published, and suddenly you're like, oh, it's all come out, and everything that you have written is not there.
Or is very
the entire
different.
concept. It's different to how you presented it. The story and things are still there. Expect what you have written, if you're especially working for a big company who have IPs and other licenses within it. Expect your words to change. Never be precious about what you have written, especially if you are working for a major publishing company. So whether it's World of Darkness, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons, and whether it's Paizo, or whether it's the story that you write is not the story that is going to be published, and be okay with that.
Yep.
And I think that was one of the biggest things that I had to learn when I got into commission writing, I suppose. Not community content, obviously, but within that commission writing is you can write a story and they'll take that idea and then they'll just change everything about it, but keep the idea, but a lot of the details will change. So I think that's a really big piece of advice is don't be precious.
Yep. All right. And so, Carrie, you may not have advice, but maybe something that you took away from this whole, like, really lengthy conversation.
I feel like I have to process it. Like, I need to go into a small room and be like, think and absorb and figure out, lay it all out so it makes sense.
So we did plan this for what, like an hour, and what are we like?
That was a lot of
hours
Yeah,
in?
we're
Right?
at 2.5 hours right now.
Whoops.
I think the only thing I got is the main thing is chase it down. I think is what the main takeaway I have at this moment is that if you have questions, talk to your developer. If you have got an idea, call the company.
Yeah.
A lot of it seems like to chase it down, and then
You have
after
to be an
that,
active participant.
yeah, you can't wait to be discovered.
Talk to people.
Not all of us fall into it.
Talk to people.
Yep.
Just
So.
be proactive, I think is the word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yep.
And it's not just proactive to the company. It's like, if it's not going anywhere, like, chase up other people. Be proactive. Support yourself. It's your work. You should be proud of it. Make it happen.
All right. So, thank you guys both for coming on to the first podcast and for staying on for so long. I apologize for the length.
Oh no.
I'm
you
going
for
to
inviting
have,
me.
yeah.
Hey, you two are fine. It's still midday for you two.
I know it's really late for you, David. I'm so sorry.
It's not yet midnight.
Oh, well, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to have both of you share your social medias. I'll share my social media and then do the closing. So, Carrie, why don't you go first?
Okay, I have a blog because everybody told me I was really funny and I had to put it all in one place so they could read it. It's called Baby Carrots. I suppose I should give the address, right? baby-carrots.blog. You can read all about my ridiculous life with my ridiculous children. That's all.
All right, David?
Sorry, just working out how to unmute myself there. I'm a professional. So, other than content on Darker Days Radio with Dark Hammer and occasionally on the other side of Darker Days Radio, I also have my own actual play streaming service that is a little bit weird at the moment because I have really bad internet. But we do actual plays over on YouTube now as The Drunken Storyteller. So you can find all sorts of indie RPGs over there with a load of really fun, amazing people. We just did one called The Shadow of Mog. It's one of the first actual plays of that system. And we've done some other really big name first actual plays over there. On the other side of that, there's a podcast that relates to folklore and things, and we do occasionally do how you can apply folklore and folklore festivals to RPG, but it's mainly a folklore podcast. And I think, you can find me on social media when and if I can be asked to do it as the Drunken Storyteller. I'm really bad at social media and I hate it. You can also find me on DriveThruRPG and the games that I've done there as David Whitworth, which will be a lot of the DDR stuff and some other things. I think there's about 12 to 15 games under there now. So
Yeah.
and that's me.
All right, and you can
And
find
who are you,
me.
Crystal?
You can
Who are
find
you?
me. You can find more information about me at thegeekypanda.com. You can also find me on social media at bodyandsoul152 or at thegeekypanda.com or at thegeekypanda, depending on which social media. If you also have questions, I will leave my email as well in the show notes, but you can email me at crystal.m.mazur@gmail.com. Or you can reach out on social media. You can also reach out through the Darker Days Radio email or social media or Discord as well. So you can find all of that information. We are Darker Days Radio. Our email is darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. Our Facebook is /Darker Days Radio, at Darker Days Radio at all other social media. We're on Instagram, Tumblr, on Tabletop, YouTube, and Twitch, and our super fun Discord with the link in the show notes. So please come and
Chig.
I mean, I am going to identify as a problem for him in Gencon. That's going to happen.
I am so looking for. Can you? Is there a possibility of it being a stream? Because I just want to see you two interact in real life.
I can't guarantee that we're going to have a stable enough internet, unfortunately, because we're in the stadium for some of it, and the stadium doesn't
stable
really
enough
have a good internet.
or just stable enough interaction.
Both. We are going to be recording it though. It's going to be hilarious.
Yeah.
And amazing.
Yeah.
All right. But thank you everyone for joining me. I will be having more releases of the podcast episodes after Gencon. This is the first and only one I'm recording before Gencon because I like my sanity. Everything else is going to come after Gencon.
Overrated.
And if you are going to be at Gencon, please come and find me. I am more than happy to talk with people as long as I'm not headed to an event. And if you are a freelancer or you are looking to freelance, I am hosting a very casual freelancer meetup. It is going to be in the Omni Sovereign lobby. And it literally, it starts at 7 o'clock on Thursday night, which is Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Ugh. And, but you can come at any point. You don't have to come at 7. You don't have to stay the whole time. You can come as you are, whenever you are done with your events or anything like that. Come check in, hang out with us, listen to us tell war stories and funny stories about how art notes can get you into trouble.
If only I could
right.
get on a plane and travel over to see you.
I know, it would be amazing. I want to meet you in person so much, David.
We do need to try and get me and Chris and Pete over to America to meet everyone.
Oh my God, yes. Oh, that'd be so awesome. So
you know what?
amazing.
Everybody go buy the Darker Days Radio PDFs that we've got out on Drive Through RPG as freelance writers. Support Darker Days Radio, and maybe at some point we can all get together. So me, Chig, Crystal, Mike, Pete, Chris, everybody together, James, and we can all just get together and we can meet somewhere in the world, and you can have this most amazing in-person live experience podcast. So go support the channel.
That'd be fantastic. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.